Well, that Syria uprising and crisis can be traced back to February of 2011. And perhaps you remember this. 15 teenagers were inspired by the uprisings in Tunisia and also in Egypt. And at the time, they wrote anti-regime graffiti on the walls of a small town in southern Syria. They were arrested and then they were thrown in prison. Now, about a month later, Syrian troops reportedly fired onto a peaceful demonstration over the teenagers' arrests. And at that time, several people were killed. By August then of 2012, 1 year ago, President Obama, of course, said that the Syrian regime's use of chemical weapons would be a red line, something we have heard so much about that comment. And then just this past month, the Obama administration announced it would send small arms and ammunition to the Syrian rebels. Now, Syria's ally, Russia, reportedly sending warships to the Mediterranean as expectations grow of an imminent strike from the United States. But Russia's Navy is denying a deployment of anti-submarine ships and missile cruisers in response to the events in Syria, saying it's all part of a planned rotation of the ships in that region. You believe that one? Well, in the meantime, the U.S. is deploying a fifth destroyer to the Mediterranean. So much going on this morning.
And
Bill?
Heather, we wanted to show our viewers a bit of the area too here, down here off the coast of Oman, Persian Gulf, and also off the coast of Yemen. You have some of the fiercest aircraft carriers you will find anywhere on the planet. But closer into Syria now. Heather, you just mentioned this, the 4 naval aircraft, the warships, of which there will be 5 very soon here off the coast of Syria, out of the range of any anti-aircraft fire that the Syrians might have on the ground there, but still up to 5 now in the eastern Mediterranean. You see all the Air Force assets, whether it's up in Italy, whether it's in Cyprus or southern Turkey. There's a powerhouse of military activity in this region of the world. Advance at one time specifically on Syria itself now. What could be potential targets? We've talked about the chemical storage areas here to the east of Damascus, here around the town of Homs, and here south of Aleppo, southwest of Aleppo, just near the Mediterranean Sea, where many of these naval warcraft are parked. One more time now, advance it, and we will show you what we believe are, there are dozens and dozens of military bases throughout the country of Syria, primarily in the western part of the country, but there are 6 primary bases where Assad has used aircraft jets for the past 2.5 years now on this war that continues down here around the capital city of Damascus. So that gives you a little bit of the lay of the land for what could be, if indeed a strike happens, what the targets could be in Syria.
The decision by President Barack Obama to bomb Syria has been intentionally leaked to the press in great detail by the White House. The still unanswered question is, why would an anti-war president who sat back and did virtually nothing while 100,000 Syrians died suddenly become outraged over a chemical weapons attack? The largest military deployment in the Mediterranean since the Gulf War is now taking place. Mr. Obama has stated he has no intention of removing Syrian leader Bashar Assad from power, nor is there any plan to attack the stockpiles of chemical weapons that have killed 426 children. For 2.5 years, the president has tolerated the Syrian civil war, but no longer. The looming attack is not simply about the gassing of Syrian men, women, and children. If it were, the U.S. would have already taken a different approach when thousands of Kurds died from chemical weapons during the attack by Saddam Hussein between 1986 and 1989. Over 182,000 died as the inhabitants of over 20 Kurdish villages were gassed. And oh, by the way, about 250,000 children, Iranian children, who were in the front lines. A resolution passed by both houses of Congress urging sanctions against Iraq was vetoed by the White House. And further, the White House granted Baghdad a loan of $1 billion. I've seen these facts on this. They were presented to me while on a state invitation from President Barzani of Kurdistan. It was not until 2010 that the acts of genocide were addressed by the Iraqi High Criminal Court. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was on the brink of attacking Iranian proxies in Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, as well as the Iranian nuclear reactors and command and control centers. In order for President Obama to preempt that attack, he authorized a selective strike. This operation is simply to stall an Israeli assault while at the same time disingenuously declaring to Iran and the Israelis I am not bluffing. But instead, Hezbollah will strike out of Lebanon with the full support of Iran at Israel. This is high-stakes poker or Russian roulette. The likelihood of Iranian retaliation against Israel will be nearly 100%. Reprisals will begin through Hezbollah and the Revolutionary Guard, Iran's strongest arms in Lebanon. The probability is extremely high that Israel will be forced to take immediate action against Iran's nuclear proxies, projects, and its retaliatory operations. The Obama foreign policy shift is like threading a needle in an attempt not to draw Russia and Syria's allies Iran into the conflict. There is little doubt that this attack will be the greatest recruiting tool for al-Qaeda camp in close proximity to the WMD plants. The director of Israeli intelligence, the late Issa Harel, said to me, "You kill a fly in America and rejoice. We kill one in the Middle East and 100 come to the funeral." Retaliation against this attack will be borne by Israel, considered to be the little Satan to America's great Satan. Both Iran and al-Qaeda will blame Israel for the military intervention in Syria. To think America is not in the crosshairs of terrorists would be extremely naive. Former CIA Director James Woolsey told me during an interview that Hezbollah cells already operate through the Mexican mafia on America's border and are embedded in major U.S. cities. They're simply waiting for direction.
Regime. That said, the video underscores a sticking point for many lawmakers, the lack of a clear-cut ally in Syria. They want reassurance that the U.S. won't be helping the bad guys. Senator John McCain joins me. Senator, I'm curious, what kind of calls are you getting from constituents on this? We're hearing from other members of Congress in the Senate and the House that overwhelmingly they are getting calls from their constituents against any kind of military strike.
Well, I'm getting the same calls, and that's why I'm doing town hall meetings all over my state so that I can give people my point of view, but also listen to them. It's beginning to turn around some. I'm surprised. At first, it was very heavily against, and now some of it's beginning to turn around. I think it certainly indicates a couple of things. One is that Iraq Americans are very skeptical, and I understand that, and I'm skeptical too because of Iraq. I think that there's a mistrust of the president. I think it's been mishandled. The president saying he was going to strike and then saying going to Congress. Look, that's why I think a lot of us who are very concerned about this issue have to speak to our constituents, and I think the President of the United States is going to have to go on national television and speak directly to the American people.
If the vote was today, do you think it would pass?
I'm not a vote counter, but I do know that there are many of my colleagues, understandably, that have to be convinced. This is a very, very tough call. There's no more important vote that a member of Congress will cast than this. And so we have our work cut out for us.
Right now, the administration is saying the goal of the mission is to deter and degrade Assad's chemical weapons capability. Yesterday, you inserted language into the authorization that says any military operation should, quote, change the momentum on the battlefield in Syria. It sounds like you and the administration are still on different pages.
Well, look, that's not true, Anderson. I talked to the president in the White House, and he said he had three objectives. One was to deter the capabilities of Bashar Assad to deliver those chemical weapons. Second was to provide support for the Free Syrian Army. And third was to change the momentum on the battlefield. That was the president's stated goals, and so I am not in disagreement at all with the President of the United States.
So when you get those calls from constituents and people say to you, this is not, how is this possibly in the national security interest of the United States to strike Syria? What do you say? How is this in the national security interest?
This conflict is not confined to Syria. It is a regional conflict now. You know, Anderson, the refugee camps, the destabilization of Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq has turned into killing fields that we haven't seen since 2008, and a total resurgence of al-Qaeda. This is not a conflict within Syria. And if we send a message to the world especially the Iranians and the North Koreans, that we are allowing Bashar Assad to use chemical weapons and slaughter those 1,000 innocent women and children, then we are making a terrible mistake. And in the 1930s, the world sat by while gas was used by Mussolini, where all kinds of atrocities took place in the 1930s in a whole lot of places, and dictators had their will. And we sat by and watched these things happen, and we paid a very, very heavy price for it.
I'm sorry, when you saw the front page of the New York Times today, that picture, we showed the video earlier, what appears to be an execution of Syrian military troops by rebel forces. It adds to you know, a list of horror stories we've heard committed by rebels. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the Assad regime as well. But yesterday, Secretary Kerry said only 15 to 20% of the opposition were what he called bad guys or extremists. By saying he'd been were extreme. Who's right here?
Secretary Kerry is more right in all due respect. Civil wars are horrible things. We found out that in our own civil war. Look at Andersonville and the frustration that these fighters feel. It's children slaughtered. It is absolutely possible. But these things, unfortunately and tragically, happen in war. And I notice that the Syrian National Council and the Free Syrian Army have condemned that kind of behavior, and they ought to punish the people who perpetrated it. The United States of America, if we are more involved, then I think that we can have a greater influence on their behavior.